Hello and welcome to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean. To my right is my co-host Richie, and we have a guest on today, Pat Murphy, expert on history and in particular on dictatorships. So we'll be investigating a little bit of the Constitution and the First Amendment, free speech, and logocracy. If you know what that is, I'll give you some time to look it up. Go ahead. All right, so this show is aired 4 times a week on Manchester Cable Channel 23. We also have a YouTube channel named Inform New Hampshire. And we would love it if you'd go check us out on YouTube and click the like button and subscribe to our channel, and certainly share it with other people, ask other people to share it. Now, I want to point out something here to those of you who are liberty-loving and patriot-minded people. This is an easy thing to do if you're interested across this country in doing the same thing we're doing. It was basically a small fee for the year to come in and participate in the city of Manchester's cable television network, and the whole studio and production is here for us to just walk in and do this show. All you need is your content and your willingness to speak up. So I would encourage you to do that, and know that at least you're making the effort, communicating, waking people up, that sort of thing. Richie and I are state coordinators for the National Liberty Alliance. We believe that the National Liberty Alliance has a legal and lawful solution to America's problems. That mainly is the reinstitution of the common law grand jury, which was taken from us in 1946 by the oligarchy structure of our political system and legal system in this country. And it was taken for very good reason, because it is an extremely powerful tool for reining in corruption in our governments. What it is a committee of 25 people who get together and operate in secret and do investigations into government and corruption and criminal activity. And when they are satisfied that a crime has been committed by anyone, a government official, a judge, or maybe somebody's not receiving due process and is systematically being destroyed by the system, it affords we the people the opportunity to indict people for criminal wrong activities, and then from that point on, it goes into the hands of a real jury of 12 of someone's peers, and that system's been stolen from us. And at this point, the court systems simply control the jury system, and they control it to the point that they get the outcome that they want. So when you have a federal bureaucracy that has 98% success rate for prosecutions, something's probably wrong with that. And if you don't think so, I got some land to sell you. All right, so we're going to get started, but first I want to make a quick mention that the political prisoner Jerry DeLamus from New Hampshire is still in the Nevada prison system. His wife Susan is a state rep here in New Hampshire, and we want to ask that you'll support them not only morally and with prayers, but possibly also with financial assistance. And Richie will give you the website that's been formulated so that you can easily make a contribution to Jerry and his wife Susan.
Thanks. Contributions can be made to patriotjerry.com. And I also want to mention that there is a fundraiser. I believe it was established by Jack Kimball. Any of you know Jack? He's got a fundraiser on May 14th at 120 Washington Street in Rochester between 4 and 6 p.m., designed to raise money for Jerry and Sue. All I can tell you about Jerry is the man went out to the Bundy Reservation, or the Bundy Ranch, to help out there and to document what was going on. He's a very, very peaceful man, not a troublemaker. And he's got trumped-up charges, and he's been in jail now for 2 months. And my understanding is, from the treatment he's getting out there, somebody is abusing the hell out of him wrongfully. In other words, anybody who's being abused in prison, it's wrongful. I worked in a correctional facility for a long time, and their punishment is being behind bars. You don't need to punish them while they're in there. Take their humanity away. It's the worst thing you can do for a human being. But anyway, if you can help out with this fundraiser, please be there. We'll announce it again next week, too. Thank you. Okay. And now I'd like to turn it back to Dean, but
one last thing.
I'm waiting for Pat.
Go ahead. Yep. One last thing about National Liberty Alliance. You can find them at nationallibertyalliance.org. They have a fantastic civics course that you could take there for free. Richie and I hold weekly meetings here in Manchester. Anyone is welcome to come. It's on Wednesday evenings at 6:30. Contact us via email on your screen, or contact us via Facebook or whatever. We created a Facebook page for Inform New Hampshire as well. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Richie to introduce Pat.
Yeah, Pat Murphy's someone that I admire and respect a lot. I think he's right up there. I think he's right up there with Thomas Woods in terms of his knowledge. I know he's a modest and a humble guy, but I like listening to him because of his knowledge. One of the things that I'll say about Pat is he paid attention in school where I probably didn't as much. And I was taught civics, thankfully. At least I had that much. But, or maybe history just wasn't my favorite. But thank God Pat's here. And I'll let you take it over, Pat.
Thanks a lot, guys. And
You're welcome.
hopefully it'll be a good night. I had an extra coffee and 3 ginkgo biloba,
All
so
right.
it might work out
There you
pretty
go.
good. I didn't pay attention that well in school because I couldn't find what I really wanted to do, which was to study history from early on. And the way I approach everything we do here is we need to do something in education to get information to young people to spark the interest in their nation, in history, in any history at all, period.
Move that mic up there, too.
In any history at all, period. I think that's probably the major problem in the country, is that people are cut off from a sense of history, and so they're detached from a sense of reality, and they're detached from the knowledge of what's possible, or how fast institutions can change and how quickly they can be immersed in enormous trouble. We know that looking at the situation in the country right now, that it's at least the 11th hour, if not close to midnight, on a lot of these big issues. I looked at the last couple of programs that we did, and I want to make a couple of corrections. One of those programs I mentioned, Agenda 21. This Agenda 21 is going to be ramped up and going on to a level that's almost with steroids, and I think I called it Agenda 3030. It's Agenda 2030. And the other question you asked me was about George Soros, if you had somebody historically that's similar to that, and there's a term for that, and it's Reds in coattails. I think I said millionaires in coattails, but it's Reds in coattails from the 20s and 30s, so he's not unique in that sense.
Except that he has a lot of money and power.
Yeah. My understanding is you guys did something on an Article 5 convention
Yes.
recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very big issue, and I wish I could have been here with you for that, but unfortunately I couldn't have. For those people that don't know, they can pull up on their website a Constitution of the new states and take a look at that. That's been around since the 70s. And I can remember in 1974, when I was just a young man, Nelson Rockefeller walking out on the floor of the Senate with a bill, I forget the number now, HCR 28, and it was calling for an open constitutional convention. And I remember him getting booed down. It seems like times have changed, and we don't quite have the same people in the Senate, Congress, and that's something that is it's very, very dangerous right now. One of the people that you notice on TV all the time is a fellow with kind of a dome of a head.
Like mine?
Mark Levin.
Oh.
And I would say to people that anytime you look at a lot of these issues, you have these so-called conservative spokesmen, and first of all, you wonder, who puts them in that position, and you wonder what their true function is. Over the years and going back, we saw people that were supposedly, traditionalists and constitutionalists and conservative. When you look at what they really do, they're anything but conservative. And I think that what people have to realize is that over a long process of time, you can take a person and they can hammer on the Constitution, on the value of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, private property. They can sound great in every respect over a long period of time, and then all of a sudden, when it comes their time to do the damage, they'll do the damage. And I think that he probably, in calling for an Article 5 convention, which we won't control, is certainly one of those people.
Well, it's interesting, Pat, because I've always been warned that the controlled opposition runs deep and pervasive throughout the country, and I've started to see that in my research, over the last few years, that it's always a great surprise because I was a big fan of Mark Levin just based on his adherence and his dialogue about the Constitution and the need to be structured under a Constitution. And then when I see him wanting to give the criminals who violate the Constitution the authority to amend it, I just can't believe that the guy's not part of that controlled opposition. So.
Yeah, with his so-called liberty amendments, you wonder about all of the organizations that are unconstitutional that have been erected by executive action, whether it deals with land like the BLM or the EPA, and you wonder if going into this this constitutional convention, they won't legitimize those and give them a solid ground so that you'll never lessen the size and the scope and the intrusion of government. Buckley was the same. William F. Buckley was the same. I remember being a kid thinking, he was such a conservative guy until eventually, I think I read a book that was called The Pied Piper of the Establishment. It was John Birch Society book, and it was just a great book, and it really started to open your eyes to see how things are massaged and how people are, they get you to trust them. And then when the moment comes for them to do their damage, they'll do their damage. But that Constitution of the new states, going back to '74, you can pull that up on your computer, and if you look at that thing, it is nothing like our present Constitution. It's a massive document. It has no mention of God. Everything comes from the government. It's a frightening document. I think the only thing that's probably worse than that is if you look at the European Union right now, at what's going on in building that whole mechanism. When you look at that Constitution, that's 800 pages. 800 pages. We have 7 articles in this document. They have 48.
Yeah, well,
it's huge.
Just let me jump in here. This is the United States Constitution, and you can see it's a booklet. It's not a book. It's not very thick. There's a reason for that. We made this small 240 years ago because we didn't want our government doing much. And we made it, and we made our government, and today our government is ruling over us. So I asked the question to judges and lawyers and politicians, how did that happen? Somebody explain it to me. I know what happened, but it's all fraud and it's all illegal. But somebody who's in authority, come forward and explain that. You can come on this show if you'd like to do it. Having said that, I want to turn it back around to Pat and ask him about the origin of political correctness as it relates to our First Amendment rights. And I'm doing that because Hal Shurtleff's coming on next week to talk about the Article 5 convention. And Pat's welcome to come back and discuss it again. But I'd like to hear about, this is my favorite topic, and it's the ignorance of this book that's going to take us down. So, and that's one of the reasons Pat's here, is to talk about his knowledge of history and how it relates to that.
Next. One correction, that's 448 articles in the Constitution of the European Union, which strips away everything that you have common law in Britain, rule by trial by jury, habeas corpus. It sets up judgeships without any legal education whatsoever. You're guilty until proven innocent. There's no, you can be tried repeatedly over and over again until the state gets what it wants. So it's really a frightening thing. Now, on the question of political correctness, as a term, if you go back to, if you read any of Lenin's works, if you read The State and Revolution, 1917, Russia's already gone into revolution, Lenin's come back, Lenin's in hiding, and you can find the term politically correct. And then you don't see it a lot, in a lot of publications or newspapers. And then there's an incident in 1934 where the United States has just crossed a great moral Rubicon. It had recognized the Soviet Union after they had slaughtered anywhere between 6 and 10 million people in the Ukraine. Franklin Roosevelt extended his hand to Stalin's blood-soaked hand and recognized that nation. And you have a meeting between Ambassador William Bullitt and Clement Voroshilov. And Voroshilov is talking about an incident in 1919 where 11,000 Cossacks have surrendered under a flag of truce, and they're promised that they're going to be allowed to go home with their families and their children. And once they're disarmed, there are 11,000 of them are exterminated. Their wives were sold into prostitution. All were dead within 90 days, and children up to a certain age were eliminated. And Voroshilov will look at William Bullitt and say, it was the politically correct thing to do. And you begin to see that in the New York Times and a few other publications. But he's simply saying that revolutionary conscience allows for something like that to be done. It becomes a moral good. So they've turned traditional morality on its head, it's really the key for modern totalitarian dictatorship. The central first movement is towards the destruction of moral conscience before anything else. And you watch that all the way through what was done in Russia. You can see it earlier in history in the French Revolution, which is a prototype communist-style revolution. And you see people being arrested for a lack of enthusiasm, just as you did in North Korea. The first ones to stop screaming and yelling when one of the leaders dies is arrested. It's found the same with Stalin. When it goes, you trace that whole history from the French Revolution on, and you'll find that destruction of moral conscience. There's an episode.
Political correctness becomes synonymous with the end justifies the means.
Yes, it does. Well, language, the first thing that dictatorships will do, particularly in modern history, is they'll change language. And there's a word for that. It's called logocracy. And if you take the individual who was best at that, who was a genius at that, that's where his real strength is. It's Lenin. And he will develop in the written word over some 420 words, usually with a suffix ISM. And he'll be able to name who the enemy is at any given time. And there'll be an inflection with that. And you think, you Bukharinites, Trotskyites, Zinovievites, all of that, and very, very effective. I can remember going to school when I was a youngster in the late 60s, early 70s, going into class and sitting down with people my age, and then listening to some of the students, and I said to myself, "This is amazing. I'm going to school with kids from Great Britain because there's 3 or 4 in here that sound exactly alike. They have a British accent, and they preface everything with and they all sound like the British actor James Mason. It's rather queer." And so then I thought, they're communicating with each other. It's almost like they're saying, I'm with you and you're with me. So I thought about that. What was the origin of that? Then years later, I was watching diplomatic histories, and I think it was Dean Acheson. And my assumption was he must be from Britain because he has the same British, that type of accent with that inflection. And then some years after that, I found a book. And it's a very good book written on former communist expatriates who had been involved in this whole revolutionary movement, for decades, and they gave their reasons for joining that movement, the psychology of the movement, and it was called The God That Failed. The publisher was, the author was Crossman, and he pulled up 6 different individuals. He pulled up Arthur Koestler, who wrote Darkness at Noon, Andre Gide, Ignazio Salone, Richard Wright, Stephen Spender. I forget the last one. But Koestler talks about being in these meetings and listening to the same repetitiveness of diction, the same phrase over and over again, whether it's racist or Trotskyist or Bukharinite, and the use of the famous air commas. That everybody used the air commas. Mm-hmm. And then he later mentions how during the Second World War, in the German invasion of Russia, that the long-range intelligence aspect of the SS were trained in looking for commissars through the use of language. They knew particular words that they had used that were simply drummed and drummed and drummed into them. Is that one of the words that they would look for, because the commissars would rip their epaulets off and stars would come off, because it was the commissar order would mean they would be eliminated on the spot if it was discovered. So one of the words that they would look for was concrete. as we say today, give me a concrete example, or give me a concrete example.
Right.
All right, because that whole period with Stalin coming to power is one of massive industrial construction on dams and bridges and factories. You know, the Depopulation Dam. You see that in the movie Dr. Zhivago, where the young girl is walking across that massive hydro dam, the Depopulation Dam. Everything with those commissars was concrete, give me concrete. And so the SS would know as soon as you hear that language that somebody that's been trained in that system in particular. So it plays a huge role. But the word too, remember, when you pick out a word, say for instance now we hear the word racism, that becomes it's a loose term that encompasses what is a multitude of enemies. You know, Stalin would use the word vervetol, wrecker. It would include anybody that was opposed to anything in a village or town or factory. Kulak was another. As Stalin, geared up, they could not break the desire of the peasants to be independent and to be left alone. So you find that word where it would mean normally an independent, fairly wealthy kulak. You might have had a horse or a pig or a plow or something. It becomes a term that becomes all-inclusive for anybody that showed anything that was resistant to what they wanted to do.
I think I have another one for you about conspiracy theorist.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they use now to categorize anyone who's in opposition with coming forward, whistleblowers, anything like that.
Anything like that. That is Stalin. Stalin understood, if you study him, he understood that the primary weapon to use against people, if you weren't going to make them disappear, as he said, no man, no problem, was mockery, that you would use mockery before anything. But
look at what they do now, Pat, with if they call you a racist, especially if it's on a big scale. I notice some of the race pimps out there go after people, and they have other people congregate on them, and they go to their employer, they go to where they shop, they go to their neighbors, and they say, this guy's a racist, he's a bigot, he's whatever name you want to use. And they target that individual so that person, I don't want to ever say anything again. They're successful at stifling the guy, even though it's human nature to dislike things and people. There are people that all of us don't like. What does that make you? It makes you a human being. That's all it makes you.
But see, it becomes an all-encompassing term. If you get somebody that is, they're pro-Second Amendment, they're pro-Constitution, they're pro-small business, they want government responsibility, they can eventually be brought into that particular group. And to a younger individual with no real education that's idealistic, they can be pulled into that. The left is, as one writer said at the turn of the century, the left is organized hatred. When you go back into history, in fact, just to use that term, left and right, where do they come from? Do you guys know? They come from the French Revolution. If you go back and you look at, that's a whole story in itself. If you go into the French Representative Assembly, the Chamber of Deputies, when you stand at the rostrum and you look out the Chamber of Deputies, it's shaped like a horseshoe. As you get into the French Revolution, those people on the right, aristocrats, priest class, bishops, those people didn't want change. They were satisfied with the past. They were connected with the past. As you move towards the center, those people might have wanted, a moderate amount of change. They don't want the king to have a lot of power. They probably don't. They want their aristocrats to be pulled back. They may want a constitution like the United States. And then as you get towards the left, they want to do away with the king. The far left, they want to kill the king. And you go to the extreme left, the Jacobins at the top, in what they call the mountain, the Jacobin Club. They want to totally transform the nation. They want to totally demolish everything in France, change the religion, bring the symbols of the revolution into the home. That's where that comes from, but it's not the best political schema to use. Some people simply say collectivist. We'll put them all on one end. On this end, you have anarchy. Then you have limited government, as we have right here. Almost a lack of a system, just enough to keep things in check, and the average person knows how to behave, and they get along well because they're being and their upbringing is ethical and it's moral. Then as you get farther, towards the left, now you have your collectivists. It's just another way of explaining
This is just my opinion, Pat.
those systems.
If you're talking about left and right, I don't like using labels, by the way, with people, but I understand what you're trying to say. If you go out here to the left and you go out here to the right, there's very little difference. They're both destructive as far as I'm concerned. If people in America today centered themselves around this book, the Constitution, and forgot these labels. I'm an American. I know Dean is and I know Pat is. I like the values that we've established in this country. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't go out of my way to hurt people. We help people if we can. The point I'm trying to make is simply this. Understand the Constitution. Stop arguing about abortion, gay rights, all those issues out there that the government or somebody's planting in front of us.
Gender
because
bathrooms.
They have nothing to do with this book. The government can't, according to this law, it's still the supreme law of the land, the government can't decide those issues under Article 1, Section 8. They're prohibited by us from doing that. Focus your attention on learning that, and we'll stop them. Put them back in their place. And the budget, that's another story. Article 1, Section 8 limits the budget, and they keep talking about the debt ceiling. Real quick about the debt ceiling. You want to stop it? Stop the Fed from printing money, and we won't be paying them interest, and the debt ceiling won't go any higher. It'll start to come down. What's so difficult about that? I don't have an IQ of 240. It's simple. Article 1, Section 8 allows Congress to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Not the Federal Reserve, Congress. They never had the authority to give that away. Never. Yet they did it. Making it illegal, or unlawful.
Going back to the language, to logocracy, which is a way to, do you want to say something?
Well, you got about a minute and a half.
Logocracy, the last couple of things, if you remember, when Obama was elected, he mentioned they were going to fundamentally transform the nation.
Exactly.
Now, if I use the word fundamental, what does that mean to you?
Foundationally.
Oh,
It's the origin of something. And then transformation, you're going to change the composition of something. So you're literally being told that everything based on natural law, the Constitution, private property, is going to be shifted out. So a lot of times it's right in your face.
Well, it is in our face all the time.
Or just the use of the word change, which some people think means a change of an individual in office to bring about more jobs or security, and it has a whole different meaning for particular groups of people, which is largely it's attached to the dialectic and how history works in a Marxist sense.
All right. Excellent job, Pat. Thank you so much. I
thank
just
you.
want to mention that Richie here is running for sheriff in Hillsborough County, and if you're looking for a sheriff that will honor the Constitution, support we the people, and protect the people as a sheriff is obligated to do, Richie is certainly the man to do that. I guarantee you he will not represent the banks and their interests, taking people's homes without due process. He will represent the people and prevent that sort of criminality from happening. So, and also, once again, National Liberty Alliance is a nationwide organization bringing back the common law grand juries, which affords us, we the people, the opportunity to control and mitigate the criminality in government, which we have a whole lot of here in New Hampshire. Those of you who want to see Mike Gill, he should be here in 2 weeks to be on our show. He's fighting crime in New Hampshire all by himself and doing a fantastic job.
One quick thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I just, please share this program, because in order for us to break the bond of ignorance, we have to get behind this. Share this show with people. Get them thinking.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.